So I would like to welcome everyone to this first webinar of the Copernicus Accelerator 2018. My name is Hannes. I'm part of the Copernicus Accelerator team, and you have met me probably in Marseille during European Space Week and our opening bootcamp. And for sure you met our speaker today, Piotr, who is going to give his first training session as part of his masterclass, for which you can get a certificate at the end of the accelerator. Now, before we get started, I have a very quick announcement to make already about the next webinar, which is going to be quite important for all of you. Namely, the next webinar will deal with the access to Copernicus data through the DIAS, Data and Information Access Services, for which you all received a voucher from the European Commission. Now, some people may have questions on how can we use this, what can we do with the budget available, how will the voucher scheme work. All that will be explained during the webinar on Thursday, the 21st of February, which is in 3 weeks, for which you'll receive an invitation. Before I give the floor to Piotr, some practical things to mention. You're all attendees in this webinar, of course. If you have any questions, or if you would like to take the floor at any given time, you never know, you can raise your hand. For that, there is a button on the bottom of your screen, and then Piotr can see when he can give you the floor. If you have any questions Q&A wise, there will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar. Piotr will facilitate that, but there's also a specific Q&A button for questions to be asked. So far, technicalities. If you have any technical questions during the webinar, there's also a chat function. You can write us in the chat, and then we'll try to fix it while Piotr continues his presentation. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you for being here, and I am glad to give the floor to Piotr.
Thank you, Hannes. That was very nice of you to say and mention, actually, that this first webinar is part of the masterclass series, which includes all the 6 webinars that I'll be doing with you guys. We start with a subject that is particularly important to me and to my nature, actually, the nature of a person who likes to experiment a lot. Before we started the webinar, I asked you guys to answer a couple of very simple questions, and I will just take this moment to remind, if you by any chance had made any previous attempts to put your ideas to tests, and if so, please write that down in a Q&A as the suggestions about the previous attempts that you have made before to put your ideas to test. Any kind of testing. I mean, regardless of what your ideas were, and regardless of the testing tools that you've had. The second thing I wanted you to think about is, do you think that when B happens after A, it automatically implies that A causes B? And I don't know what your answers were there, but I can certainly say that whatever the answers were, there is only one correct answer to that: no. I mean, sometimes yes, sometimes not. But this correlation that sometimes implies causation and sometimes doesn't imply causation is a very important factor, because very often when we test things, especially the solutions that we care about, we tend to think that if something happens before something else, it automatically implies that this is it, which is actually not true, because that's a kind of a cognitive bias and cognitive mistake, usually connected with the thing that is called post hoc ergo propter hoc. I can see that you're already giving some answers. I will check them later. But remember, if something happens after something else, it doesn't necessarily mean that this was caused by this thing. But it can be, of course, the truth. After all, for many centuries, people thought that the rooster caused a sunrise. But later on, they figured out that it was the other way around. So if if B happens after A, it doesn't necessarily mean that A causes B. And I want you really to remember about that, because when examining any kind of experiments in terms of your startup, your idea, your target market, it doesn't necessarily mean that if one thing happened before the other, they are correlated and they cause one another. Another thing that I want to ask you is what group of clients can become your test groups? And this is something that we call the sample group. And of course, the first thing that comes to your mind, thank you again for the answers that I can see here. The first thing that can come to your mind is that obviously my customers, my clients should become my test groups. And that is absolutely all right. But every now and then, you might want to think if you can conduct a test on two separate groups of customers that are assigned randomly. Then you increase the probability of a well-conducted test. I'm sure that many of you guys are the people of science and tech savvy and incredibly talented in this area. But remember, whenever we're doing any kind of tests, be it split tests, be it testing your ideas, it's important to take this into the consideration. Okay, and are you familiar with the concept of split test? I guess you are. So oh wow, yeah, I can see that you are. I can see the answers here. The split test is basically comparing two realities with enough data to see what matters, which is the variable that actually influences one or another. Okay, so these are the things that I generally want you to think about and remember when doing any sort of testing. Okay, testing is important because the lean startup methodology starts with testing. It is all about testing. So when it comes to testing, you need to think about the factors that influence your ideas. And Bill Gross from Idea Lab mentions that there are factors that influence your idea. When among those factors, he mentions financing. And of course, I know from a standpoint of view, financing is important, but when it comes to startup success, financing is important, but not the most important factor that would influence your success. It is necessary, it is like a foundation, but it's not the most important. So testing different ideas around financing is not the most important thing. Team, quite important, always test your team, but it's not the most important thing. The next thing, idea, very important, and testing your ideas is also incredibly crucial to your startup challenge. What do I mean by that? Putting ideas to tests. Ideas come and go, and you definitely have established an idea to develop with your startup, but testing it before developing means that you are doing it well in the lean startup methodology. Timing is actually most important. And when speaking about all the space tech ideas, and all the ideas that are based around satellites, data, agriculture, health, everything that can be assisted with the data that you gather from the Galileo problem, that is really important. Timing is right for all that. But still, you might want to think if you are in the good time with your solution. As for the timing, you cannot test that really, but what you can do is you can mostly define or observe three major forces that can influence your startup success. And these are regarding forces, regarding timing. The first one is the social force, which is the demographical force. As far as I've learned about your ideas during the Marseille bootcamp, the social force is not that influential in terms of your startups, but still, if your solution solves any sort of changes or complications that are caused by demography, the way people behave, the changes of the urbanization, whatever else that includes that is definitely something to be thinking about. The next thing is legal. Is the market obliged to follow some sort of a legal regulations? And this is a force to be reckoned with. This is a very important thing. And the next one, the last one, is technological force. Is the technology available? Is the technology widespread so that you can actually benefit from that? And if you test your idea through those three different forces, against those three different forces, and you have 3 out of 3, then it's a good sign. If you have 2 out of 3, still good. If you have 1 out of 3, still not bad. For example, if you have a startup that definitely helps some companies overcome their legal obstacle or challenges using the technology, that's perfect, okay? As for the idea, you need to test it as soon as possible. And to actually do that, you need to think about testing. What is testing? All testing is like experimenting. And for the experiment, is about comparing 2 controlled situations to establish which variable influences what. And testing the idea also should be done like that. But beware of the spurious correlations, beware of those biases. For example, there is a very high correlation, a positive correlation between the consumption of ice cream and people dying, drowning while swimming, in a sea or ocean or the lake. Does it mean that the consumption of ice cream influences the death rate of people drowning? No, because there is a third variable that explains both those situations, and that's temperature. When the temperatures are getting higher, the people eat more ice cream, and unfortunately, they also go to swim, not the same people, and they drown. That means that very often when we have 2 sets of data that seem correlated, it doesn't mean that they are necessarily tangled together. So you have to think about it when doing the testing. But what else? Also beware of the survivorship bias when comparing yourself to other similar solutions. I know one way of testing your idea might be that you're testing your idea against other competitive solutions or competitive similar solutions in another market. It is okay to do that, but remember that there's something that is called survivorship bias. What is survivorship bias? Well, let me explain that. Some time ago, there was an interesting article published about the cats. Cats, you might think, what do cats have something to do with startups? Well, survivorship bias. And the veterinarian observed a very interesting situation. Cats that were falling out of the higher floors from the buildings survived more often severe damages than the cats that were falling out of the lower floors. And that got them thinking that there is some sort of an incredible evolutionary feature of the cats that allowed them to survive even the highest fall. What it turned out, it was a prime example of survivorship bias, because the people who were coming to the vet, to the doctor, to the pet doctor with their survived cats were the ones who were bringing the cats that were alive and that fallen out of the floors of the high floors. Not too many people were bringing the dead cats to the pet doctor, and that actually made scientists think wrong. They thought that there is a special evolutionary feature, but it was just a prime example of survivorship bias. When we watch other solutions, when we compare ourselves to other solutions, very often we take a look at the success stories, of the others who survived. We neglect the stories, or we do not have access to the stories of all those companies who did not survive or who totally failed. So I'm definitely advising you to be optimistic, but you cannot compare yourself to cats that survived only. You also might want to look at the ones that died and think about it. Was the timing wrong? Or was the social force not strong enough? Or was any other aspect of the startups not good enough? Okay, so those are the things that you might consider when testing, and also not to be victim of the optimism bias. Okay, I'm not saying not to be optimistic. I'm saying be possibilistic. Okay, don't be pessimistic, don't be too optimistic, but be possibilistic when doing it. When testing different hypotheses, you need to approach each situation with this in mind, and then you will do no wrong. It's all about 2 questions on each stage of your startup. And now I want you to think about those questions, because towards the end in the Q&A, I will ask if you have come up with those questions, okay? So towards the end, I will want to do that. So the first thing is, what is my riskiest assumption at this very point of my startup life? So what is the riskiest assumption? What does it mean, the riskiest assumption? Well, for example, the riskiest assumption might be that people generally need my idea, or that people generally have this thing that they want to test. And after we establish the riskiest assumption, how can I verify it? What sort of test, what sort of survey, what sort of observation do I need to do to verify my riskiest assumption? Okay, so those 2 questions, bear them in mind on each step of the way, okay? Because the lean startup is all about the MVP, and when you do that, you need to establish and verify the riskiest assumptions. So, for example, when using the MVP, I'm usually using the story mapping techniques that we will discuss in the next episode, but I want to briefly just go through this so that you get the idea, okay? The story mapping technique is all about establishing first, so to have your features prioritized. So you basically do this, okay? You first set the primary goal. The primary goal is to allow users to receive an individual customized pair of shoes. Or in your case scenario, the primary goal is to allow users to aggregate data about the hydration and the rainfall in the certain area. Or the primary goal of my startup is to allow users to benefit from real-time mapping of a weather. Whatever is the primary goal, just establish that. And then when you have this primary goal established for your app or your solution or your platform, you can basically test it. I mean, because the riskiest hypothesis is that they need it, okay? Because they might not need it. So once you do that, then you do the user flow. The user flow is usually all the steps that a person, user, end user, a business user, or individual user must do to go through this. And so in this really strange scenario that I came up here is customize shoe, buy shoe, manage order, deliver order. And then you make a list of features. And then this list of features is basically this. You define your MVP, and the upper row here, the upper row that you see basically here, is something that we call the walking skeleton. The walking skeleton, in the case, is the smallest possible representation of a working product. You can already conduct the tests based on the walking skeleton, but sometimes it's not enough. It's good for the very early alpha version because it allows this to happen, but the walking skeleton should not be the only thing that you do. Then you can arrange the MVP, which is the minimum viable product, and in some cases, the minimum viable product is more sophisticated than our skeletal product. So somehow you want to separate the features which are must-have to your users and the features that are nice to have or won't have, like the ones that you do not want to have. When you have that already established, it's time to test it. So testing things is, from a startup point of view, all about verifying your ideas with people that matter. And I want to tell you a story about the startup that I have once worked with. This startup has observed that during the parties that they've attended, a lot of people have a basic need of more, and that more can include either food or beverages or anything else. For them, for the customers, they thought the usual pattern to do that is to call a taxi or to go to the shop or to stop partying. So they wanted to verify the idea of having like the delivery service that would be like the Uber for party people, that would connect taxi drivers who are willing to do shopping with the customers who were partying. And funny thing is that they decided to verify this idea with people who were partying, meaning they wanted to verify it with their end customers. And what's the problem with that? Well, basically the target group of their startup is okay. But what they did, they conducted this test during the huge party, an open air party, when they asked drunk people the question, if you were given a chance to order more beverages, alcoholic, booze, whatever, via the app, would you do it if you ran out of the alcohol? What's the problem with that? Well, first of all, when asking any sort of customers, you are not supposed to imply the solution. I mean, if you ask people, would you be willing to use this app if you ran out of booze? They will probably say, yeah, I would. But the bigger problem here, and both on the ethical scale and anything else, is if you conduct a survey with drunk people who really want to get more drunk, that's not a very good thing to do, okay? And I know it's an abstract idea, and I know that this is not your idea, and this startup generally failed, and I hope yours does not fail, but this shows that on any stage of the thing, when you really want to find out things, you just cannot ask the customers the questions that imply the answer. It's like asking a customer question, do you want to support your ideas with verified data that is aggregated for you in a real time? That's a yes answer. I mean, no sane person would answer that question differently. I mean, yes, of course, I want to verify the data in the real time to make sure my business grows. So if you ask that question to people, they will answer with yes. Or it's like asking a person, do you like to travel fast? I mean, normally people would say, yeah, I like to travel fast. It's like asking people, do you enjoy spending time in a traffic jam? No, I don't. So the problem with that is that, first of all, you need to establish a good target group to test your ideas, and then you have to be very careful with the questions. So much better to observe the behaviors versus declarations. But if you want to ask questions, ask open questions. Don't ask a yes/no question in a survey. I know it's easier because it's so much easier to aggregate the data that are yes or no questions, but the truth of the matter of fact, open questions are better. In this case, take cue from the journalists, ask how, what, when, and then people will open up. Because if you ask a question, were you scared? They will react to the strongest verb, to the strongest word, which is scared, and they will not react to, and they will say, yes, I was scared, or no, I wasn't scared. But if you ask them, how was it? Then they will describe the situation. And this is more like an open interview, just to observe and ask questions. It's a very important thing. And observing the behaviors is all about observing the daily life. You can also conduct something that is called a journaling research, where you ask your supposed customers to do journaling for some time regarding special behaviors. Like they would journal every single thing they do when they come into work to establish their daily habits. And if they have the habit of doing something that you want to solve, then it's a cue. So remember, if your startup fails, it's sometimes because of bad luck, but sometimes because you don't ask the right question. But of course, if you're a startup, people often want to tell you what you want to hear. So just don't do that. Also, if your startup failed, it's sometimes because it didn't solve a tier 1 problem for a large enough audience or a rich enough audience that is willing to pay for your solution. So here's how to never make that mistake again. And that is all about thinking about that, how to do that, how to do the right-minded question. What is a tier 1 problem? A tier 1 problem is a general, most important problem that the people want to solve because they are sick and tired of the reality. And the tier 1 problem is usually connected to something that is called commander's intent. So you might want to verify what is the commander's intent of your startup. Not your startup, sorry, your client, your customer, okay? So what is a commander's intent? A commander's intent is the main motivation and the main goal of each company or each person working in the company. So for example, a commander's intent for a human resources person working in an IT company is to hire the best IT specialists from the market. The commander's intent of the huge farm owner of the huge farm somewhere in Italy is to have the maximum benefits from the field and to have the most optimized crops, whatever. Commander's intent is this. So you better think and double test what is the commander's intent, because every problem that gets in the way of the commander's intent is the tier 1 problem, okay? The tier 1 problem might be the lack of a platform that helps me aggregate the data. But they also might think that the tier 1 problem is that they just don't know how 1 year compares to the other. The tier 1 problem is that it used to be great in the past, but now it's really impossible to have it. So now, how do you approach testing a tier 1 problem? Okay, first, write down the problem, not a specific solution. Okay, you want to be able to write down your problem in a simple statement. Okay, I'm going to give you a few examples, but then I also encourage you to write down your problem that you're solving. For example, it is impossible to follow up with the customers once they leave the restaurant. Okay, it is difficult to determine which customers will churn before they actually do. Or it is too hard to design professional quality graphics for social media. Or it is almost impossible to determine the hydration of the ground in the area 2 weeks from now. Whatever is, write down the problem, not your solution yet. Then you have to determine if it's a tier 1 problem or not. It's easy to identify problems. They are everywhere. So for example, my problem right now is that it's a little bit chilly here where I'm sitting, but that's not a tier 1 problem for me because it's not stopping me from doing what I'm doing. So what you're really looking for when it comes to your problems is something that is called a tier 1 problem, which means the problem you're looking to solve is one of the top 3 problems your potential customers are experiencing, okay? let's say your eventual target buyer, your business-to-business client, is the CEO of a small business. Their top 5 problems might look something like this. They are not possible, they cannot generate more sales. They get marketing running efficiently. It's impossible to hire a head of marketing. They need to outsource the payroll and benefits. They need to get better at social media and invest in Facebook ads. The tier 1 problems are only the first 3 ones, okay? For them, the biggest problem is sales. So if you help them with sales, then it's okay. So tier 1 problem or not. Then properly determine existing solutions and don't ask the customers which products they use to solve that problem today, because they might not even use a specific product. Instead, how do you handle that today? How do you handle that today? And just listen. They might use a product, or they might hack together a bunch of tools or processes to solve the problem. So one of the best questions you might want to ask when testing and verifying your idea is, how do you handle that problem today? And if they mention specific solutions, you might look for pains in existing solutions, okay? So they will specify that, and that will be absolutely good. Okay, so let's recap. You have a clearly articulated problem in the sentence that suggests a problem. Then you have that is being experienced by at least 20 potential customers that are out there. Then, where there is an opportunity to solve that problem in a better, cheaper way, okay? And you can clearly articulate that 20%, which is why your solution will be better than the existing solutions that they are already using, okay? So if you have that, it's a clear hint that you might be getting somewhere good. Now, after that, you need to verify if there is a budget for a solution. And I know investors, funds are out there, but really try to verify if there is really a realistic budget for your solution, okay? So this is the step number 5 that you might want to take. Then, then you use your prospects to define your roadmap. So why do you use prospects to define your roadmap? Because based on the severe problems that they have, you might want to start solving the most severe ones first. So then defining it is really, really important. And that's it when it comes to the very process of verifying the initial ideas. It's about getting to talk to clients, getting to talk to the prospects, and that's it. But also beware of your brain. I mean, not your brain in particular, because your brain is working fine, and I'm sure that is helping you to come up with the great ideas. But what I mean by that is beware of the cognitive biases like confirmation bias and motivated reasoning that can really be dangerous for your business. What do I mean by confirmation bias? Confirmation bias is only looking for the answers in your client surveys, in your testing, that confirm your ideas and solution. So it's like looking in the world and looking only for arguments that support your idea. It can be dangerous on many levels because you might just fool yourself. Motivated reasoning is even the confirmation bias to the max. You are actually conducting the whole process of testing with one motivation so that it goes your way. A prime example of a motivated reasoning confirmation bias and a rather conscious fraud was the Fire Festival that was supposed to be great, and the people behind it were always using motivated reasoning to come up with this. By the way, watch it on Netflix. It's a great thing for all the startups, I guess, not to be caught up in the motivated reasoning. That can be really dangerous for your thing. And now I'm going to talk about some experiments that might help you actually double test your ideas, okay? So first of all, if you're exploring the problem and the market, you might want to do a couple of things that could be easy and quite interesting. First of all, you might want to blog publicly about what you're doing. And I know some of you guys might think, okay, but if I start blogging publicly about what we're doing and it's a patent pending idea, people might steal it from us or try to steal it from us, or people in some other part of the world will do it. Well, not necessarily. Plus, you get the benefit of people always constantly giving you insights about it. One of the startups that I've worked with called Syntoil, which is a interesting installation that helps to upcycle old tires, and they've just recently won a competition, Chivas venture. They've actually blogged publicly about the solution, and they landed on a website called Vicop, which is the equivalent of the American Digit, and they got a lot of great responses and a lot of great insights into their solution. Then again, you might want to go and ask open questions on Quora, but again, just verify who's answering those questions and if you see any interesting feedback there. You can create service and monetary incentives. You can also try to collect pre-orders. Well, that's usually what is not an often solution when it comes to business, but collecting pre-orders might be an interesting thing. Like, go to our website to check if you're interested and enroll on our list to be the first one to find out about the solution. You can either run test ads with AdWords, Facebook ads, or LinkedIn ads to generate more traffic to your website to see if people are really interested in your idea. Okay, these are all the ways that are not extremely expensive in terms of marketing money, but that can be very, very beneficial. So these are the things about exploring the problem and the market. Exploring your solution might be done on two different levels. First, you might want to test multiple iterations on your site, or you can talk with the real users of your beta product. Okay, so if you have a beta product, just make sure people come in, and the beta testers, especially if they are collected carefully, they might be the most important people in the assessment of your product. They will give you insights. They will help you dramatically with that. Okay, so this is also very interesting, and now you're gonna some more ideas to use that you can actually use when doing things. Well, first of all, customer interviews, yes. Landing pages where you kind of fake it till you become it or fake it till you make it with the intention that you will make it soon or later are a good idea. I mean, you can generate leads to those landing pages and see if people are interested in your solution or solving their problem. A/B tests, yes. And also explainer videos, okay? If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video demonstrating your product user experience is worth 1,000,000, okay? So the most famous example, I guess, of a startup using an explainer video to validate the market and sell their MVP is Dropbox. And I know most of you probably have heard of the company, and maybe even you've heard about how they did it, but their explainer video testing idea is great. It began with a 3-minute video that demonstrated Dropbox intended functionality, which resulted in signups increasing from 5,000 people to 75,000 people overnight. All of this in the absence of the real problem, the real product, okay? The reality was that the founders of Dropbox observed that in the time when the email was not good enough option to send large files, people would constantly walk around with pen drives or floppy disks or whatever to take one thing from another, which made things difficult for people working like freelancers or graphic designers because every often they were working remotely. So what they did was, before they even released a single line of code, they actually recorded a video, and the video helped. It was targeted to a very tech-savvy early adopters who appreciated the Easter egg and humorous references throughout the video itself. So this Dropbox Style Explainer video served as a totally brilliant validation of the market before the founders ever had to invest in the infrastructure and development needed for this very high-tech product. And they reached the target customers well enough. And I mean, they did a great job doing it. So think about it. If you can probably do an explainer video and you can see how people react to that, if they really want it or not. The next thing that you can try to do to lower the costs of testing your product is actually something that is called piecemeal MVP. The piecemeal MVP means putting together a functioning demo of your product using existing tools and services. Existing tools and services, so simple sometimes as an Excel spreadsheet or anything else. It's basically bootstrapping on a very, very low budget. And what you want to achieve is deliver the experience instead of building anything yourself. So you just want to test if the experience is okay without doing it. Groupon, for example, the startup that you are familiar with, in the early stages was a combination of WordPress, Apple Mail, and an Apple script that generated PDFs manually as orders were received from the website. Of course, it wouldn't serve good for long, but for early start, just to test the idea, it was absolutely perfect. Then we have the Wizard of Oz MVP. What is the Wizard of Oz MVP? Rather than building a video or coding a framework, an alternative option for the initial stages of market validation is to deliver the product or service manually. Wizard of Oz comes from the idea of putting on the impression of full functionality, essentially faking it until you make it, okay? Customers believe that they're playing with the actual product, but in reality, the work behind the scenes is being done manually. For example, Aram Sabati, founder of Zero Caterer, started with a giant spreadsheet which he used to keep track of companies and caterers he could connect with. So he delivered the full experience, but of course the hard work was going behind the scenes, but that allowed him to establish that there is a need for that. The second thing is Zappos, for example, began the same way. And the founder, Nick Schwinmurn, was putting up photos of shoes from local shoe stores on a website to gauge demand for an online store. So it was almost real, but then when it got real, they actually produced it, okay? The third option is the Concierge MVP. The Concierge MVP is kind of similar to the Wizard of Oz, but except of faking a working product, you are upfront about the manual work, and the product or service is delivered as highly customized service to selected customers. So it's almost like a personalized thing. For example, Rent the Runway, the startup from New York, I guess, tested its online dress rental business model by providing an in-person service to female colleague students where anyone could try the dress on before renting them. The same was for Uber. First, they were the first class in-person service of cars. Later on, they just decided to go the full speed with the idea that we know now. So it helps to validate the Riskiest hypothesis that women would rent dress, and served as a great concierge MVP that put the business in front of customers and got them feedback. So if you can do that, do that, okay? So of course you can also work with the prototypes. That's one thing to do. Even if the prototype is just on a piece of paper, and then you go to this client and you talk about them and elaborate with it. But it allows you to actually stay ahead. The one most important thing is to leave the building, okay? don't stay in the building, because that's just nonsense. If you stay in the building and you continue to work on the product without ever going out, it's not going to do well. I won actually my first startup competition. It was decades ago, so I'm really, I have to admit it, I'm really old, but it was in the days where startups were really just emerging. And we went to our first startup competition with the idea for an app. But what I've learned later on, that we won because we got enough courage to go to the shopping mall and do the interviews with the customers. No other team did that. We did that, and even though the idea was not the most brilliant one, but we verified it with clients, and the judges, trust me, were good. But of course, it's not about the judges, it's about the customers. And remember, the truth will set you free, but it might also hurt you, because the world might not need your product. But I do hope it does, okay? So don't worry. I mean, I do hope, but of course it's better to find out that the world does not need your product. What else? Well, step-by-step tutorial. First, determine your target customers, and I mean be honest brutally about it. The target group is your target group. Start with the hair on fire problem that your group of people have. Target customers ultimately decide how well a product meets their needs. So also use market segmentation, like macro segmentation, to clearly define your target customer. That's the first step. If you tell me that the target customers are the farmers in northern Italy, that's still not enough. I mean, I need to have a clearly identified segmented group. Then identify underserved customer needs. By that I mean, after forming a target group hypothesis, understand their underserved needs. What is their tier 1 problem? What sucks in their life? Then identify the specific needs that correspond to a good market opportunity. It might be little things that bother them about the solutions that they are already using. It might be that something is not working. It might be that they got impatient. It might be that their situation in the economy has changed and they need something else to survive. Everything that works. Then define your value proposition, my friends. Clearly, a value proposition is the essence of product strategy and outlines a plan of how product will meet customers' needs better than the alternatives. Choose which customers' need your product can address. So we help target group achieve this. Unlike other similar solutions, we do this better. We do this like this. Anything goes, but have a clear value proposition. Okay, we will have a separate seminar dedicated just to pitching and value proposition, but really you have to have a clear value proposition that can be expressed in 1 or 2 sentences. And then specify your minimum viable product feature. After you define the value proposition, specify what is the functionality of your minimum viable product. This is only to build what you need to create enough value for the target customer to validate that your product is headed in the right direction. Always verify, always ask your question, what is the shortest, smallest test that I can do to verify this, okay? Then create a minimum viable product prototype, or a Wizard of Oz MVP, or a piecemeal MVP, or the Concierge MVP, anything that I've talked about. And just show the target customers, the testing customers, a version of your product in order to get feedback and integrate that feedback into the product. You have prototyping tools such as InVision that can actually simulate the user experience of the final product with enough fidelity and interactivity to obtain critical feedback from customers. So do that. Really do that as early as possible, and then test your product with. Okay, once you create, use a screener to ensure market research participants have the attributes of their target customers. Schedule one-on-one meetings, schedule interviews. And I think also even recommends conducting user tests in ways of 5 to 8 users. So when you do that, when you observe people playing with your prototype, how they interact with it, don't tell them, do this, do that. Just tell them and observe them. Just give them one task and observe how they deal with that, okay? As for this, testing is a never-ending story. I'm testing ideas on a daily basis, even if they are fully developed ideas. I'm testing ideas with startups. I'm testing ideas with target groups. I'm testing ideas with my students. Coke Japan tests new products every week. Every week they release a new product and they test, but they usually fail. Maybe because they don't go to my seminars. Well, of course I'm not. I'm just joking. I wouldn't expect that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the Q&A to see what I have here. I'm going to see now the questions, questionnaires and personal interviews you've mentioned here. I'm going to answer now live the first question that you've mentioned, that you use questionnaires and personal interviews. Very good idea, but also when doing that, please remember that with personal interviews, you cannot prompt people with yes/no questions. It's better to just listen. And I know it takes time to listen, but it could be a lot better. Okay. The next is to ask about their problems. The next one is from amazing friend that I cannot actually speak the name of because I'm afraid that I will make a mistake and I would not want to do that. So I went to people to ask about their problems, issue, and present them with various options. Okay, okay, some not. Again, the same question. Very good answer. But again, be careful with prompting people into thinking that this is the best solution, okay? The next is from Maria. Firstly, we study the market and our potential clients, so our tests were made with the right people. Very good. But also when talking with the right people, try to make smaller segments and really conduct the interviews with them. Very well. Now, Devlina, end user interviews, online questionnaire surveys, very good. Make sure to sometimes do the randomly assigned people to the groups. Very good, okay? Sample customers would be operator of indoor farms. Very well done. Okay, but what you said is that you're not familiar with the concept of the split test. If any of you guys are not familiar with the split test, I'm going to explain it very briefly, okay? A split test is generally the test when we have the experiment of two controlled situations. So a split test on a website, for example, would be that we have, I don't know, 500 of people of traffic coming in from the paid ads or AdWords or just organic traffic, and we would definitely split randomly, assign this traffic to two versions of the website, maybe with two different colors of the sign-up button, and we would see the results. And in the split tests, we usually compare only one variable. So for example, if you work with the prototypes and you want to show with a proper prototype, you just basically only test one variable with two different groups of people. Okay, a split test would be even possible with smaller amount of people than 500, but the more the better. Okay, good. And now, okay, speaking with potential customers, again a very good answer. A public administration test policy makers. Oh, okay. Maria, I think that this is a very interesting issue. Your group is probably under a lot of legal force. So for them, their commander's intent is to oblige to the legal force. So very good. Now, the next one is from Francesca. Okay, the algorithm. Okay, well, it's different, but of course, if it's the algorithm, you test it like the algorithm should be tested. But also remember that you also need to test it with the end customers. Okay, good. Okay. Well, Maria, a very good riskiest assumption that everyone is concerned about climate change, and I'm pretty much sure that that is probably the declaration of many, but they're not really that concerned about the climate change. So you might want to think about how do you really test if they are concerned about the climate change. Maybe there's something else that you want to bet on, okay? And again, very good, Maria, the commander's intent, pain of the client, yes, but not necessarily. It's like a want of the client. So for example, I will give you a very simple example in simple words. For example, if I want to run the marathon, my commander's intent is to run marathon in good time. So everything that brings me closer to that want is going to be interesting for me, is going to capture my attention. So, for example, if your customers want to optimize the production of the crop, or they want to basically just want to earn more money and have less costs, that's their commander's intent. So it's not necessarily the pain is more like a tier 1 problem. Very well. Okay. Okay, now Peter, whoa, well done, Peter. Everything is in here. Test groups, conflicts. Okay. Testing with okay. Judging from your approach, for now, it seems that there are no pitfalls in this. Only make sure that you always ask yourself the set of questions. What is the riskiest assumption, and what is the easiest way to analyze if it's really valid? Okay, good. And Sandino, how do I do with the competition? Is it a good sign or a warning? Well, if you have competition, it means that there is the need for the solution, because no other person would do that. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's a good sign. It's not a warning. Francesca, A/B testing and split testing is basically the same. So you're quite right here. A/B testing and split testing. You can have also multivariable split testing, but that's mostly for the development of the website usually used. Okay. Okay. Tarash. Okay. Trump is not concerned about the climate change. Well, I'm sure that's kind of yes, but he's concerned about the power. So his commander's intent would be to keep the power. So if everything that helps me keep the power is going to capture his attention. Okay, very well. Okay, I didn't know we're going to go there, but let's okay. Okay, good. And Matthias, you're thinking of gamifying your software to incentivize the user. The only negative aspect of doing is that if you incentivize people too much, they will actually stop doing something when you stop incentivizing them. I'll give you an example, which is kind of the one that I know, is that the market strategy of the MyTaxi in Europe, and MyTaxi is like Uber competitor, but with licensed taxis. So they had a huge marketing budget to incentivize the clients, the customers, with huge promotions. So they gathered a lot of people with the promotions. But then when the promotion ceased and they had the large pool of customers who were using them, they stopped using them. I mean, they were still registered, but they didn't really have the habit of doing that. So another Taxify app came in and they had cheap, so they instantly went there. So the only pitfall might be this, but of course, gamifying is good, but don't incentivize with money. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Peter, very good approach. Okay, guys, I think that those questions were really good. They make me think that you are kind of ready to go out there and test. And of course, you are already doing that. But I want you to really read on more about the confirmation bias, especially because it's one of the psychology flaw that we have, that we tend to look for arguments that confirm our idea. I mean, I'm not thinking that there is something wrong with your ideas, but very often it's better to just, be very transparent and ruthless about your ideas, and in order to really maintain a very, very good product. Remember, define your audiences. Maybe your audience is somewhere else. Just be honest about it and segment it, then test it with them and be open to their suggestions, even the ones that you observed. And don't be fooled by the declarations, because if you ask your closest family and relatives, will they be using your product? They will probably say so. This was the first webinar. What's ahead of us is another consecutive 5 of the masterclass. We will definitely talk more about how you should deal with the MVP. And before that, I will also send you out some pre-work to do. This time the pre-work was pretty easy and you did it very, very well. But what I want you to know is that the next one is also going to be equally easy, but it's going to be slightly more engaging, okay? Okay, I will just read one more question from the testing, and I will. But to do that, I need to have the rest of the testing. So I'll keep waiting for that from an anonymous attendee. Okay, anonymous. That sounds like the group that is actually messing with a lot of internet. But I hope it's not you guys. That it's not anonymous. And that it has nothing to do with WikiLeaks or anything else. Okay. Okay. We want to make a landing page fake product where people can subscribe if they want to get their product. Okay, good. We want to advertise on a famous magazine digital newsletter. Very good. Of course, providing that I would also try to diversify the sources of the traffic, so that not only the famous magazine digital newsletter, but maybe some paid ads on Facebook or something, on LinkedIn, depending on the target audience. And then I would probably verify the results. I mean, the more the traffic, then you can see the conversion rates and you can see what goes. Also, what I would try to do is that if you have enough of traffic to drive to this landing page, I would probably try to do a split test with 2 alternative landing pages that were different by one feature, so that I can check which is better, because that can also be an important thing. Okay, so that's it from me now. I can't wait for the next webinar with you guys. Remember that if you complete all six, if you complete all 6, you will get a certificate and you will get a great kudos from me. So thank you so much for being here. I still have very warm memories from meeting you in Marseille. Hope to see even more of you on the next webinar. So thank you very much. And I'll give one to Hannes now, I guess.
Thank you so much, Piotr. That was great. It was a super entertaining and interesting webinar. I personally also enjoyed it, and I'm sure all the others also did. Indeed, Piotr has, of course, 5 more webinars for you as part of the Startup Masterclass. Now, the next webinar on the 21st of January is not part of the Startup Masterclass, because that one will deal with the Copernicus Dias, so definitely show up there. And then on the 14th of March, we'll have another webinar on stories of your fellow mentees. Namely, we'll have 3 alumni speaking here to present what they actually learned from the accelerator, and they will give you some tips on how to most benefit of the whole program, and as well will share their experiences as a Copernicus-based startup. And then from the 4th of April onwards, so that's already 2 months from now, Piotr will continue with a series of training sessions for you, and the next 5 will be in one row on a monthly basis. So you'll get your invites for that. Thank you all, and I wish everyone an excellent evening. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Piotr.
Thank you, wherever you are. I'm here for you. Thank you. Bye. Ciao.
Bye.